All right, part two of today's show. We are going to give our Notre Dame team predictions, and we're going to kind of rattle through some of our bigger picture predictions and what that is going to look like. And so, of course, here at Irish Breakdown, presented by FanDuel on the Believe Network, all of those fun things. We are glad that you are here. This is our fun show. This is the one that we get to do, that we are looking at the entire season and predicting what Notre Dame is going to be. And, you know, when we sat down at the beginning of the summer, we were kind of figuring out the plan. And Bryan was like, okay, we could do this like on a Thursday in the afternoon, like when you're at school. And I was like, no, sir. We are doing this one on a
I
Saturday.
do not remember that conversation happening at all.
We are doing this on a
I think
Saturday.
Vince made that up.
I did not make this up. We are doing it together. I will be a part of it. And no, this is a fun show to do, and we are going to predict what Notre Dame is going to do this season.
Yeah. It's going to be fun, guys. And you know, this is kind of, you know, we talked earlier in part one of our show today about the ceiling and the floor of this football team. And this is kind of, this is where this is really pertinent of how do we find out just how good this team is going to be? And this is really where we can have fun with the superlatives and the MVPs. And all. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter who ends up as the MVP. It doesn't matter who ends up as this, the most outstanding offensive lineman, whatever. It matters is, do you have a W at the end of the game? Like, do you have more offensive? Do you have more points as a team? I don't care if you get them offensively, defensively, special teams. It doesn't matter. Is your defense elite and your offense is just okay? Is your offense okay? Is your defense elite? Are they both elite? Are they both? At the end of the day, it doesn't matter. Do you have more points than the other team has at the end of every Saturday, or in the case of the opener, a Sunday? That's what matters. And you know, style points don't matter at the end of the day. If you win all your games, it doesn't matter how you looked doing it. Like the 2001 Miami team was way more sexy than the 2002 Miami team was way more sexy than the 2002 Ohio State team. Who was hoisting up the trophy at the end of the game? Ohio State was. Why? They had more points. It ain't that hard. And we're going to have some fun kind of looking at just the schedule a little bit. But at the end of the day, fellas, it boils down to this: is you get judged on the wins and losses at the end of the day. And when people that remember great running backs, you remember great running backs because they were part of great teams. Do we look at Reggie Brooks the same way if he was part of a 6-6 football team? I don't know that we do. Do we look at Rocket Ismail and Tony Rice, especially the way that we do with the admiration we have of Tony Rice, if he wasn't part of great teams that won a ton of football games, including a national championship? At the end of the day, I don't think that we do. If Brady Quinn's career in his last 2 years statistically looks the same as it did, but he played for teams that had the same record that he had his first 2 years, do we look at him the same way that we do now? I don't know that we do. And I think that's the fun part of this whole thing, guys, is this is really what matters. I don't care who leads the team in receiving yards or catches or touchdowns, as long as you got more points than the other team at the end of the game, and you can do that every single week. And that's what I'm looking forward to.
Fair enough. So we are going to kind of break down the schedule here a little bit. I mean, we've done a schedule show in the past, but we're talking more kind of big picture and what are the toughest games and things of that nature. And so we were tasked with coming up with the toughest games on Notre Dame's schedule. I think we can all agree that A&M and Miami are on this list. I'd be shocked if they were not on everybody's list. But in addition to those two, what other games are you guys circling that you're like, okay, these are tough games for Notre Dame, whether it's where it falls on the schedule, whether it's just because they're a really good team or projects to be a very good, you know, whatever your criteria is, what are the next toughest games for you, Trevor?
Yeah, outside of those two that to start their season, when I look at who Notre Dame has coming up, my third toughest ranked game that I looked at was USC. Now, I also think that USC is going to be much improved this year, but for all of the reasons of it being a rivalry game, everything that's going into it, it's a night game at Notre Dame Stadium. I think they're going to be prepared for it. But USC was one of the very few teams last year in the regular season that gave them fits. One of the few. And I think that they're going to have a little bit of addition by subtraction. And I think that now slowly, because some of it was because their hand was forced, but I had some questions about Lincoln Riley last year and some members on the team kind of understanding what went into the Notre Dame rivalry and if they wanted to if they thought it was as big as how Notre Dame fans viewed it. And now I think that's starting to come to light a little bit. And so I have USC as their third toughest game this year, especially for the implications of it could very well be the last one on the regular season schedule for a little bit of time, unfortunately.
Boo.
So I think that I know, and I think that adds a little bit to it as well. My fourth hardest game for Notre Dame this year is on the road against Pitt. I'm also a believer that I think Pitt's going to be a much better team than what people advertise. And you're on the road. It's going to be in November. I think that the backfield combination of Desmond Reed and Eli Holstein, if he's healthy, I think is going to give them some fits. I think it's going to be the best linebacking core that they also go up against this year. And so I have Pitt as my number 4 most difficult team. And number 5 was tough because I was tied between both. I was tied between either on the road against Arkansas or at home against NC State. I think NC State's going to be much more improved. I think that they're going to have the better team. But I don't know what I'm going to weigh more, just being on the road in that environment, first time playing a team in program history, or the more talented team. I ultimately erred on the side of Arkansas for the SEC implications of it. Being a difficult environment to play in, NC State was a very close one, but I'm sure that they will be referenced later on in the show. Probably you won't have to wait too much longer to hear about them, but those are my top 5 toughest games.
I might have had them on my list, Trev, if the game was being played at night. I think the fact it's being played like 11 a.m. their time, I don't know that it's going to be as difficult of an environment at 11 a.m., which is the time the game will kick off in Fayetteville. So I think your points overall are valid. We keep hearing about how tough of a place it is to play, and we're going to find out. I think for me, I did have a question for you too, Trev. Vince obviously said Miami A&M are 1 and 2. I would like to hear your order.
Yeah, I have Texas A&M at 1 and Miami at 2.
Okay, same. Are we also all in agreement that that's the order? Okay,
100%, 100%. Yes.
Okay. My third toughest game this season is NC State. I think there's several elements to it. I don't think they're the third best team that Notre Dame is going to play. This is toughest game. I think there's some matchup things about NC State that are like, I think this could be a little bit of a concern. Obviously, CJ Bailey being a dynamic player, he's going to have a very good group of pass catchers to throw to. The defense is very opportunistic or tries to be opportunistic. And the fact that I think it's a bit of a trap game because it falls in between 2 big games. I think to your point, Trevor, if a lot of Notre Dame fans are going to look at the schedule and be like, at Arkansas, Boise State, USC. Of course, they're all bigger games than USC, or NC State, and that's part of what makes NC State here for me, is that it is a bit of the trap game aspect of it. And I know that one of the things that we're going to do is, and I'll just give it now, is what's our individual trap game? This is mine. This is my trap game, which also then makes it one of the toughest games, because the matchup is tougher than maybe some people think, and the timing of it to me also makes it a little bit, okay, are you feeling good about yourself? You've beat Miami, A&M, you beat Arkansas on the road, you just beat Boise State, you got USC coming up the next week. Is this the team you overlook? And that's what gives me a little bit of pause about this game. So that's why they're my number 3. I have USC number 4. Look, I know that Notre Dame fans, and we see it in the chat, they're going to kill USC, and they very well might. But Marcus Freeman in 3 games against USC lost to them, blew them out, and then was in an absolute battle for 4 quarters. So is it just the 23 game was the anomaly, or is just when USC comes here under Lincoln Riley, they get stomped? Like, we're going to find that out this year. We don't know the answer to that. But I think this is a talented football team, not as talented as they've been in the past. I think Jaden Maeva is going to be better in year 2. The key for him is going to be, can you limit the turn? I don't mind aggressive turnovers, Trevor, but he just has somewhere like, dude, that's not being aggressive. You just threw it up, and you didn't see that guy, and he's got to limit those type of things. I worry about, can they run the football? There's a lot of things that I question, but here's the thing I'm confident in: you're going to get their best. And I think part of the reason that USC got blown out in 2023, there was great game plan by Al Golden, and there's a lot of different things that factored into it. That was a terrible matchup for USC, and it was terrible timing for USC because they were feeling good about themselves. They had beat Notre Dame the year before convincingly. They had the Heisman Trophy winner. Notre Dame had lost 2 of their last 3 games, and was getting stomped by Louisville. They lost Ohio State, barely beat Duke. There was no respect of Notre Dame in that game, none, and they paid a very dear price for it. And I think at times Notre Dame didn't have enough respect for USC last year in that game. This is a game where I think that Notre Dame's going to want a little bit of payback, but I think USC is going to come into this game confident, thinking, "Hey, we could have beat them last year. Not should have, but we could have beat them last year." And that's what I think makes us tough. And I think their roster is talented too. In my number 5 game, Trev, I kind of made a face when you said Pitt, because I'm like, man, I'm going to have this Pitt game in my top 5, and I'm going to be like super smart and savvy, and no one's going to think about Pitt. And then here you go having them number 4. But I think all your points are absolutely correct. It's a tough matchup. They're one of only 3 defenses that Notre Dame faces this year that I think has the second level speed to give Notre Dame some problems in the run game. Now, if their first level gets dominated, it won't matter. But if their D-line just holds up at all, they have the kind of linebackers that can give Notre Dame's run game some problems. It's at Pitt. This is a place that Notre Dame has not always played that great. Now, I think their last trip to Pitt, I believe, was all the way back in 2015, wasn't it, Vince? And they dominated Pitt that game. Mm-hmm. But that's a rare occasion. That hasn't happened a ton. No, they played in 2020, and beat them 45-3 in 2020. Much closer game than the final score. That was their quarterback was hurt. It was COVID. I don't even count that year. I just think this Pitt team is scrappy, and I think they could give Notre Dame a game. I thought about Boise State. I thought about Navy. I thought about Arkansas. I think there's a lot of good candidates for this number 5 spot. I went with Pitt because of the timing of it. I think the fact that it's where it's placed, and then it being late in November in Pittsburgh, it's not going to be an easy place to play. Notre Dame's going to have to bring it that night.
So you guys have talked about all of mine, but maybe in a little bit of a different order, which is always interesting. I'm actually pretty high on USC, and so I have them at number 3. Again, the other 2 are still the top 2, but then it's 3, 4, 5. Is where we can have our opinions, I guess, a little bit more. But USC is my number 3 for many of the reasons that you guys both stated. I think that it's still going to be early enough in the season where USC may still believe that they're a good football team, and they may try to bring that to Indiana. And so we'll see how that works out for them.
I'm sorry. I just love how Vince is trying to give credit to USC, but can't help himself but throw shade the entire time.
Wait till the next
these little petty comebacks. I think it's brilliant, Vince.
Just wait till
while you're giving them credit for being the 3rd best team on the toughest game on the schedule. They think they're going to be a good team still. They have yet to realize they're USC. I friggin' love it. Thank you.
Yeah. There's still number 3 for me. My number 4 team, and I do think that if this team was coming to South Bend, this would not be on my list, because I don't think Arkansas is a great football team, but I do think that going to Arkansas is going to be a thing. And I know that they are playing at 11 o'clock a.m., which is a benefit to Notre Dame. But it's still Notre Dame coming into Fayetteville for the first time ever. And I feel like that is going to get the locals all stirred up, and they're going to be with their cowbells, and they're going to be doing
Mississippi State.
Is that Mississippi State?
Yeah.
What?
They do the
hooey piggy thing where they're all up here and doing this.
Hooey piggy thing. What is wrong with you? What? Just keep going, Vince. Just keep going. You're on a roll.
Listen, I watched the SEC
over when the
documentary.
Germans bombed Pearl Harbor?
Right. Was it over? Just let him go.
Vince is on a roll. Just keep going, bro.
Just let him go. I do think it's going to be a very different. It might be the most difficult road environment, depending on what Miami looks like at night. That's going to be number 1. But I think this could be a very close number 2, even though it's in the morning, basically. I still think it's going to be a tough environment. And so that's why Arkansas is up there for me. The next one's NC State. And I will just, since you already did it, Bryan, it is also my trap game because of where it falls on the schedule. Boise, USC. I like the fact that obviously it's at home. I think that's a good thing for Notre Dame, but it's a trap game. I think it's going to be very, very easy. Number 1, coming off the Boise State game, there's going to be a lot of publicity around that game. It's the Irish wear green. It's all the things, right? And then it's, oh my gosh, this could be the last time they ever play USC, and NC State could just fall through the cracks. And the thing is, not only do they have the opportunity to be a very good football team or a good football team, you don't want to sleep on them, right? You don't want to be looking ahead to USC. You don't want to be resting on your laurels of maybe what you've done the first few weeks of the season. I think NC State has all the capability of being a trap game for Notre Dame, and it worries me. The NC State game actually does worry me a little bit from a trap game perspective.
I just think anytime you've got a dynamic quarterback, that makes a team capable of upsetting you. It does.
Yeah.
No, of course, Notre Dame's upset last year. What's ironic is that's not the type of team that's upset Notre Dame.
Right. This is true.
The teams that have upset Notre Dame are more because Notre Dame's offense sucks and doesn't get to do the job. I mean, Northern Illinois' quarterback wasn't a dual threat guy, and neither was Marshall's, and neither was Stanford's in 2022. But this is a different type of game. This is a game where you could get beat and not play terrible.
For sure.
That's what makes it a little bit different for me. Trev, what was your trap game?
Let me explain. I also have NC State as my trap game that we explained, but I wanted to talk about my number 2 potential trap game just to kind of switch it up. It is Pitt. That's why I have them on this schedule for me. And here's why. Pittsburgh could be one of 2 teams going into that matchup. It's their 10th game of the year. I could see them being 7-2. And then I could also see them being some sort of 4-5, 5-4, depending on health of the team or who's available, how they perform. And so I look at the schedule and I look at it and it's like, look, you get Navy at home at night the week before. I always get a little bit wary of new defensive coordinators game planning around Navy. Now, like I said earlier, he's going to benefit. Chris Ash is going to benefit from the fact that Al Washington is back and Max Bulla and Mike Mickens and Marcus Freeman's the head coach who has now spent essentially this will be his 5th year preparing for Navy. But I do always get a little bit nervous around how the defensive coordinator handles business around that week. We also still don't know the time of the kickoff for the Pitt game either. I could see it being a noon game or I could see it being a night game. Those are kind of like the 2 areas that I could see it being. Neither of them I love. You go from night game to noon game, or you have back-to-back night games with the second one being on the road. So there's a lot of moving factors to Pitt, but you combine that with, to Brian's point about NC State, this is a team that could beat you even if you don't have your worst day on the football field. So I could see that potentially being one. It's a game right before senior day. So not as big as the USC game, but there is still something to potentially look ahead to. And I could see Pitt being a very underrated team. If they go into that matchup 7-2, I don't see Notre Dame overlooking Pitt. If they enter that matchup 5-4, that's what makes me a little nervous.
Dude, go look at what happened to Syracuse last year at that night game against Pitt. I mean, Syracuse was rolling coming into that game, fellas. They'd only had 1 loss. I still don't know how. Weirdest team in college football last year. The Stanford Cardinal. 3-9 team. Their wins over 10 win Syracuse and 9 win Louisville. Just whatever. But that's a different point for a completely different day. But Syracuse is rolling along. They're 5-1. They're coming off of a big back-to-back road wins over UNLV and NC State. And they had a bye week. They had 12 days in between the game, plenty of time. And Pitt steamrolled them. I mean, it was over at halftime. I mean, they picked off Kyle McCord like multiple times in the first half. They're running them back for touchdowns. You're just like, oh my gosh. This is one of the, this game is just got out of hand really fast. I mean, Pitt in that game, guys, what was a wild stat, Pitt had 217 yards of offense in that game. 217 yards of offense, and they beat Syracuse 41-13. And it's not that their offense played bad. Their offense had almost no chance to do anything because they kept returning pick sixes and turnovers, getting them the ball deep in the territory. It is not an easy place to play. And if you're not locked in, like to your point, Trev, if Notre Dame plays their game, they smack Pitt. But if you're just solid, if you're just, okay, this is a team that can beat you. You don't have to play terrible like you did against Northern Illinois. And that's the risk that you run against a team like Pitt. And like you said, that when you look at the timing of it and when they play and all those different things that kind of factor into it, I get you. I would have to agree that it's in my conversation, and is because you're right after the triple option, right before senior day. That's where it's fit into there. And maybe they're feeling good. Maybe they're undefeated and they're, a number one ranked team and they're feeling really good about themselves. And this 5-3 Pitt team is like, we're not going to worry about those guys, and you overlook them. I think that's kind of what happened a little bit with USC last year. And so I'm with you on that. I think another potential trap game for me, guys, is Arkansas.
Yeah.
I could see, I don't think that's a overly tough game because I just don't think their roster's good enough to make it like one of the 5 toughest games. Everything you guys said about environment, 100% agree with. I just look at that roster and I'm just like, I don't see it. But I do worry if they're coming off maybe a couple losses. They play at Ole Miss and at Memphis right before that game. And I worry about it being early for Notre Dame. It's an 11 a.m. game for the Notre Dame players. Or it's a noon game for the Notre Dame players. They don't play a lot of noon games at Notre Dame, and they've had some rough games at noon. Not always, but they've had some. Is that an overlooking them game? You beat Miami, you beat A&M, you just annihilated Purdue, and you got Boise State in that all-green game like Vince was talking about. They're in the conversation for me as well. And I think you can make a case that that Arkansas might even be more of a trap game than Pitt simply because the one thing that helps them a little bit with Pitt is the rivalry aspect of it. It is a bit of a rival. So maybe that helps them be a little bit more alive for it, where what's your motivation to be fired up to play Arkansas, especially if Arkansas is maybe coming off of a couple losses.
Yeah.
So that's where that game could concern me a little bit.
Well, I was just about to say Arkansas is already being overlooked. I mean, FanDuel right now has them at they're the 13th best odds to win the conference right now at plus 17.5. And they're being severely overlooked. Now, to Brian's point, I don't think they have the roster to compete for the conference championship, let alone be able to beat Notre Dame when they host them. But point being, they will be a team that's kind of being nationally overlooked already.
Bryan, I think you had a question that you were going to throw out.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you guys 2 things. Is what do you, when you look at the schedule and you're making your predictions, and this may be a different answer, but I want to know what you view as the toughest stretch of 3 to 4 games of the season after the first 2. And then what is the stretch that you think will ultimately define this season? It could be the same. It could not be the same. And I'll give you my answer first. And I'm curious what you guys think about this. I actually think the toughest stretch of football is in November. But it's part to be because they will have faced the defining part already. And the defining part to me is Arkansas to USC. Because one of 2 things is going to be true. Of course, 3 things could be true, but I think one of 2 things is true. One is you're 2-0 coming out of the A&M game and you're feeling really good about yourselves. Or B, you're 1-1 and you lost one of those games, and now there's a lot of pressure on you to say, hey, how are we going to roll? And everybody say, well, they did it last year. Different team, different leaders, different coaches, different team. You can't just assume they're always going to do it. And I say how you perform from Purdue. Let's just start with Purdue. From Purdue to USC, to me, that is the stretch that's going to define your season. We literally just mentioned 3 potential trap games during that stretch. Yep. Arkansas, Boise, NC State. We have NC State and USC. All of us have at least 2 of us have 2 of those guys in there. Trev doesn't have NC State, but they're his trap game. You're like, that to me, that stretch will define this season. Who they are coming out of the USC game is going to say, okay, we're going to go into it, and their October schedule's over on October 18th. It's over because they have a bye the next week, and their next game's not till November 1st. We're going to know by the middle of October if Notre Dame's a championship caliber team or at least a playoff caliber team. If they got 2 losses at that point in time, they're in trouble as far as getting into the playoffs. It's possible, but it's going to be tough. They're going to need help. They no longer can. If Notre Dame's only got 1 loss at the end of the season, they control their own destiny. Let's be honest. In a 12-team playoff, they do. They're not going to be left out with 1 loss. 2 losses now, you better hope somebody else gets beat. You absolutely better hope somebody else gets beat. And so if you can manage that slate of games, Purdue to USC, I think that's going to define their season. And then that leads to what makes November tough. You've had to put a lot into the season so far. You had to travel to Miami. You had to play A&M. You had to go to Arkansas. You had that tough 3 straight home games against Boise, NC State, and USC. And then in November, you've got 3 games away from home. You've got a trip against rivals. And teams that have had some historic upsets of you. Stanford has had multiple back in the 90s. And then, of course, recently, Boston College with the epic 93 upset. They've had some other games. And then, of course, Pitt's had knocked off Notre Dame in some big games at times. And then you've got the triple option mixed in right in there against what I think is going to be a really good Navy team. And you're worn down. You're tired. Injuries are piling up. And you're not playing opponents that necessarily pique your interest the same way you get in September. That to me makes that a tough stretch. And like you said, Trev, there's good football teams you're going to face during that stretch also. And so to me, it's the defining stretch leads to the toughest stretch. How do you guys see that? Do you see it the same way? Do you see it differently? Do you think one stretch is kind of for both? I'm curious to get your guys' thoughts on this.
So when you originally tasked us with this question and I was looking at the schedule, my initial thought was, the defining stretch is still the first two games, but we're not talking about the first two games, right? So the defining stretch.
Yeah, it was after that stretch.
Correct.
Because if we're talking about the most important stretch, I mean, obviously
the first two.
Or the toughest, it's that
right.
first two games, of course.
100%. And that springboards you into the rest of the season and what the rest of the season is going to look like. I mean, bottom line. But the 4-game stretch of Arkansas to USC is what obviously stood out to me. I mean, that is the stretch of most importance. But then defining is going to be how they finish it off. That is going to be super important because now all of a sudden all of those games are magnified and all of those players are all of those teams that are playing Notre Dame are looking at it. Okay, we can spoil their season, and those are scary teams. And I'm not even talking about specifically the teams that are on Notre Dame's schedule. I'm talking in general. When you are playing teams that have nothing to lose except to spoil your season, those are scary teams. And you got to put those teams out of their misery early. Like that's what you have to do as a championship level football team. And so the most important is that stretch from, Boise to USC. But the most telling for me as to whether this is going to be a championship level team is going to be at the end of the season. Can you do what you're supposed to do in those games? Can you put those teams away the way that you're supposed to leading into the playoff? Are you a championship level team? Do you have a championship level mentality? That's what I need to see. Can you go out to the West Coast and, end Stanford's season the way it needs to be ended? Put them out of their misery, right? Let Andrew Luck start thinking about next year. Can you do what you need to do on senior night against Syracuse? All of those different things. That tells me whether this team is a championship level team. Yeah, the wins are important early on, all of that. Are you doing what you're supposed to do when you're supposed to do it? That's why those last few games are going to be uber important to me because everybody's going to have them penciled in, the playoff, and they're going to be talking brackets and all of those things. All the noise is going to be prevalent in November for Notre Dame. Okay, well, you got to go take care of business against opponents that you're going to be heavily favored against. What's that look like? That's going to be important to me.
Yeah, as far as toughest stretch goes, I think I still got to err on the side of September 27th to October 18th. You don't get a bye. You play two programs for the first time in your program's history on the road against Arkansas, at home against a ranked Boise State team, and probably will still be ranked by the time they get to October 4th. You get NC State, which is your trap game, and then USC. From a football opponent standpoint, I think that's your toughest. But where I do, and Bryan, I agree with a lot of what you said, but where I think the defining part of their season will be that stretch of November is, look, you get 5 games in November. And if you end it very similar to how you ended last year, what gave us confidence that Notre Dame was going to go on the run that they did? It wasn't just because they beat Florida State, and it wasn't just because they beat Virginia and Army and USC on the road. It's because maybe you can't use the word dominate for USC, but for all intents and purposes, it was still a 14-point game in a game where they never led your rival on the road. That's somewhat of a dominating performance. But that is what defined it for me to let me know that Notre Dame was gearing up to go on a run. I would have felt a little bit differently if they beat a really bad Florida State team at home like 27-10. But they didn't. They beat them 52-3. In a sloppy game against Virginia that was just filled with weird calls and bad execution. It was one of the offensive line's less impressive performances of the season. You still won by 21 points, and then you go out to Yankee Stadium and you beat Army by 35. A good ranked Army team in the Shamrock Series. I think that November stretch is what's going to define Notre Dame's season, big picture. Because if they're playing opponents where, look, every opponent that they have in the month of November, I confidently can say that Notre Dame has a far superior roster top to bottom. Far superior. But if they go in and they're getting those like 21-14 wins and they're winning 17-10, that's going to give me an indicator of, okay, how far is this team truly going to go in the postseason? You might have one of those, but it's going to give me significantly less confidence of their chances in the postseason. So I'm going toughest stretches from September 27th to August 8th or October 18th. But I do think the defining stretch will be in the month of November.
I love it. Thanks for answering that question for me, fellas. So, hey, here's the final piece, guys. We're going to go to the playoffs next, and we're not going to give you all of our Notre Dame prediction, but we're going to give you our Notre Dame regular season predictions. So here's what we're going to do. We're not going to go game by game. We thought about going game by game, but as we give our records, you'll understand why we don't go game by game when we do it. But I want to go Trevor, Vince, and then I'll finish up. I want you guys to give your regular season prediction for Notre Dame and tell people if you do or do not have Notre Dame in the college football playoff.
Well, I'll get us started then. I have Notre Dame going undefeated.
I wanted to start it off right. That's why I wanted Trevor to go first. Tell us why, Trev.
I have Notre Dame going undefeated. When I look at their schedule from top to bottom, there is not a single program on there that I see, a team that Notre Dame faces, that I can confidently say they have even – there are some that may have comparable rosters, but not top to bottom. And for the majority of Notre Dame's schedule, they have the far superior roster. I don't know if I see a Northern Illinois loss on there because I don't know if there's a program on there capable of upsetting Notre Dame like what Northern Illinois did. Marcus Freeman answered the question for me of if he's able to get his team ready for the big moment. You had the postseason run that you went on. Notre Dame was ready for Ohio State. They weren't shocked like they were in 2012 against Alabama. Mm-hmm. I just think that the game plan was a little bit lackluster. But when I look at Miami, I have no fear that Notre Dame is going to be – Marcus Freeman is going to get this team ready to play down in Hard Rock. At home, I know he's 1-2 in home games, home openers, but it's not Marshall, it's not Northern Illinois, and it's not Tennessee State. It is a probable top 15 ranked SEC team who you faced last year on the road to open up your season. If you can get through that stretch unscathed, I'm confident in saying that Notre Dame goes undefeated and they go 12-0. I would be more nervous if their game right after Texas A&M wasn't Purdue. I could eat my words on this. I don't think that I will. I don't see a game bad enough that Notre Dame plays where they lose to Purdue. That's what I mean by how they don't have that Northern Illinois, like they weren't focused for Northern Illinois, but Northern Illinois was good enough to beat Notre Dame in Notre Dame Stadium. Yeah. I just don't think that that's Purdue this year. And then again, I think it's going to help them out that they have two teams for the first time in program history. I don't think Marcus Freeman goes and lays a goose egg there. And then you have USC and you're rolling. So I have Notre Dame going 12-0.
What say you, Vince?
Well, as I really wanted to put Notre Dame at 12-0, and I just couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. But again, the reason we're not going through this game by game by game is because I would pick Notre Dame to win every game.
If we just took every game out with no context, yes, correct.
That's absolutely correct. And we sat here at this time last year, Bryan, and I said Notre Dame was going to be 11-1, and I didn't know what game that they were going to lose. I could have gone through every single game on the schedule, and I would not have picked Northern Illinois, but I ended up being right that they went 11-1, right? I'm kind of in the same boat this year. I'm picking 11-1, but I don't know which game that'll be. Is it going to be a tough game like one of the first two? Or is it going to be a game that nobody anticipates, to Trevor's point, like a Purdue? Like, I don't know the answer to that. I am hoping that Notre Dame has gotten to a point where they're not going to lose to those, like make those head-scratching losses like they have in the first 3 years of Marcus Freeman's tenure. I'm hoping that they've gotten past that and that they're not going to overlook teams and, all of those different things. It's hard to go 12-0. It is. It's hard to go 12-0. I think you've made the point, Bryan, on numerous occasions that of all of Alabama's national championships under Nick Saban, I think he went undefeated, twice or something like that? I always forget what the exact stat is.
He only had 2 of his 7 titles. He had 2 undefeated teams, and the COVID year is one of them.
There you go.
The 09 team and the 20 team were national champs. His LSU team was not undefeated. His 11 Alabama team that won a title was not. His 12 Alabama team that won a title was not. And his 15 Alabama team that won a title was not undefeated.
It's hard. It's hard to go 12-0.
Neither was his 17 Alabama team.
Yeah, it's hard to go 12-0. And do I think this team is talented enough to do it? Of course. Do I think they have the right head coach in place? Of course. And everything underneath him. I absolutely think they have everything in place. It's just really hard to go 12-0. And so I'm hedging my bets and I'm going 11-1. And I just couldn't tell you what one that is going to be.
Vince, that's where I'm at. And I've just felt all offseason I'm going to pick him to go 12-0. I'm going to pick him to go 12-0. I'm going to pick him to go 12-0. I kept saying it to myself. But there's a couple things that give me pause. And the first one is what you said. It's hard to go undefeated. I mean, it really is. Even that great 19 LSU team had a couple games. They almost lost. They almost lost to Texas. They almost lost to Auburn that year. And so I don't know what game they're going to lose. I don't think it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be one of the first 2 games. It was funny. I was speaking at this Notre Dame group last year, and they have some fun. They have us make predictions and stuff like that. And I think the questions were like, will they beat A&M? And I was like, yes. Will they beat USC? Yes. Will they beat Florida State? Yes. And then what's their record? 11-1. Who are they going to lose to? I have no idea. And when I look at the schedule, what leads me to it is Trev's right. They have a better roster than everybody they play. And once they get past A&M, a pretty significant better roster than anybody they play. Alabama had a pretty significantly better roster than Ole Miss in 13, and what did they lose to them in 13 and 14? They had a better roster than A&M in 2012. They had a better roster than LSU in 2011 when they lost at home 9-6. And Notre Dame had a better roster than Northern Illinois, and Notre Dame had a better roster than Stanford. And I'm not talking about the Stanford team that Notre Dame lost to in 2022. I'm talking about the 2 that Lou Holtz lost to in the 1990s. I mean, that's just the way college football works. Clemson in 2016 had a way better roster than what Pitt had, and Pitt beat them in Clemson. It's just hard to go undefeated, and there's enough teams from Miami, A&M, kind of Boise, kind of Arkansas, NC State, USC, Pitt, Boston College, Navy. There's enough teams that have the ability to beat you if you have an off night. That is why I just can't go undefeated. But I'm sitting there listening to Trevor like, dang it, I should have gone 12-0 because his points are valid. They're a better team than everybody they play. I just think it's like I said, it's tough to go undefeated in college football. And so I have them going 11-1. I'll say this, I'd be a lot less surprised if they go undefeated this year than I was last year. I was pretty confident they were going to lose. Trev, Vince, you and I talked about this last year. I was like, I just don't know that this team there's just too many questions to say that they're going to run the table. I just would have never guessed that it would have been Northern Illinois.
Right.
I had some other teams on my radar.
Right.
I am more confident that this team can run the table than last year's team, just because they can just out-talent teams in a way that's even greater than what they were able to do last year. And that's why I think that when we look back, I could certainly see Trevor being the one that's correct on this one.
As one time I will not be upset about being wrong.
Correct.
In any way. I will not be upset about it. So do we have any more?
We're going to wrap up this section, fellas, and then going to lead into the college football playoff with answering a simple question. Do you have Notre Dame in the college football playoff? I'll answer. We'll go Trev, Vince, and then Vince, you can get us ready for the next section. So do I have Notre Dame making the college football playoff 11-1? Absolutely I do. I have them hosting. I'll give you a little teaser. And my infamous bracket will be shown when we get to this next one. So, Trev, do you have Notre Dame in the college football playoff? Duh.
Yeah.
You have them 12-0. Yes.
Yeah, I do.
And Vince, same for you.
Of course. And I also have them hosting, but we'll get to that in just a little bit. So make sure you stay tuned because our college football playoff prediction is coming up next. But make sure you hit that like button, that subscribe button, that notification bell, share with your family and friends. And, of course, jump on the boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com, our premium message board where all the intel is shared. We are pouring more and more resources into the premium message board. And so I want to make sure that everybody gets over there and signs up for that wonderful opportunity because we are kind of taking some things away from YouTube and the podcast and making it more strictly premium message board. So you're definitely going to want to get over there. We want to make sure that that is a value to everyone. And I do believe that it is. And so definitely check out our premium message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com.